like putting myself in situations where it's unusual to love people, because that's what Jesus Christ said. If you only do good to people who do good to you, like, what reward have you? If you only love people when it's easy, what reward? So if I can, take a cheap shot, or fight someone who is trying to hurt me and still love them, then that's like an exercise in itself.
We are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Saints in the South. Today we have a special guest, a man by the name of Brett Cain. And just to give a little intro of Brett, little bio here, says the pen is mightier than the sword. That couldn't be truer for Brett Cain, who incidentally has trained with world-class swordsmen, championship MMA fighters, and earned a silver medal as a Golden Gloves boxer. As much as he loves to fight, he would rather write. Most of all, he loves telling stories to his daughter. Brett is the author of Whiteout and Out by Night, both of which can be found on Amazon. Brett is also the co-host of the Ironside Podcast, which is what has led us to having our conversation today. So welcome, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It is an honor.
Absolutely. Well, if you could just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, family, hobbies, things like that. And so, yeah, just introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was a great intro. Thank you. I'm flattered. I think everyone knows me as Smiley. When I was a missionary, I was Elder Sonrisa, that smile in Spanish, and just because I'm always smiling. And it's funny, one of my friends, Gila, she said that part of her is and always will be skeptical of me, because I've had friends for years, and it takes people, weeks, months, years to believe that I'm sincere, because I'm always telling everyone that I love them, that I care about them, and that's how people know me. So people are always surprised to know that I've competed in mixed martial arts, because even when I fight, I'm smiling and like telling people good job.
I was going to ask you that. Like, you smile at your opponents as well?
I do. And like, they'll hit me. I'll be like, oh, wow, good shot, man. Like my last fight, it was a Muay Thai match. And this guy, he was kind of taunting me, sticking his tongue out, trying to lure me in. And I would just smile at him. And after the fight, we're talking. He's like, dude, I was trying to get inside your head. He's like, but you were getting inside my head because you just kept smiling. I'd punch you in the face and you'd just be smiling. So boxing, martial arts, huge part of my life. But my wife and daughter, they are my main focus. I love writing. I just started a new job, so we moved from Washington to Northern California. So my life is like, it's filled with variety. Variety is the spice of life. I've been a sheriff's deputy. I've been a volunteer firefighter. I've worked for the state. I've been a paraeducator. And I went to college in Virginia and Utah, like tons of stuff. And it's like, so I'm definitely a jack of all trades and a master of none. So nothing too special. I think I'm unique in a lot of things, but not particularly special. I just love everyone, and I like trying new things, like doing new things, like meeting new people, and that's probably the easiest explanation of me is that I love everyone.
Very good. Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, that's great to hear. So I'll just kind of what led us to this here today. I'm a big podcast listener, so I'm always, looking for new podcasts and everything, and on a variety of topics. I know Kenny listens to a lot of podcasts as well, and I think the Rogue Bishop up there, aka Michael, he's recently gotten into listening to some podcasts and so forth. But anyway, it was several months ago that I discovered your podcast, and started listening. And then as I was scrolling through and I saw Brad Wilcox. I was like, holy cow, man. See, he got Brad Wilcox on there.
Yeah, big time.
So yeah, absolutely. And so one of the times that I'll listen to podcasts is while I'm working out. And I listened to this one specifically while I was working out. And this was normally I can kind of keep going with my workout, but with that interview, I found myself stopping and just listening throughout that interview. I mean, powerful interview. So much so I even sent you a message on Twitter. I said, hey, great interview, great job. And I told you that I sent it to several individuals, including several bishops. So I ended up sending it to several of my buddies, a few of which were on the High Council as well. And I said, look, y'all have got to listen to this interview. Okay. I said, he does great interview, and Brad Wilcox lays out some great things, youth program. And then, how the bishoprics transition into going back to being a young men's presidency and everything. And I'm going to let Michael here kind of take over and tell his experience of getting a hold of this podcast, and then kind of pushing it to the High Council and to the stake presidency, and then kind of what ended up happening. Go ahead and fill us in on that. Well,
Brett, it was an amazing podcast. How you got Brad Wilcox on there, I just keep doing stuff like that because it went viral after we got a hold of that thing. I mean, out here in our stake and in the neighboring stakes, it went viral. I sent it out to the High Council. I talked to the stake presidency about it. I told them, I said, I wish that I could have heard this from Brad when I was still bishop, because this is a game changer. What he was talking about, the things that he was talking about, absolute game changer for bishop. It was kind of funny because he made, if I remember right, he made a comment in there that a lot of people were asking, okay, well, we've got these changes. When are we going to get training? And I think he made some kind of comment like, we already got it. Well, I didn't remember getting training. I mean, it came out. I mean, I remember getting COVID and everybody shutting down and we couldn't go to church. Yeah, but I don't remember getting any training. So to me, that was training. What that podcast that you did with him, Brett, and was so critical. It's so well done, and just so critical for today, for our bishops, our bishoprics. And so we subsequently did some training on that throughout the stake. Our young men's president and our young women's president, under the direction of the stake president, are now doing bishopric trainings on that. This is what it looks like. This is how the program looks like. This is what we should be doing with our youth. I mean, it's just absolutely, like I said, I'm overusing this word, but it's a game changer. It completely changes how everything is supposed to be done when it comes to the youth. And like I said, I wish I would have had it when I was still bishop, because it tells you exactly what you need to do and how to do it. And then you can go through with confidence. It was kind of funny as I was listening to it, because I kept thinking, man, I'm vindicated. Because when I was trying to roll it out as the bishop, oh my gosh, the biggest adversaries, if I can use that word, were parents. And they said exactly what Brad was talking about. Like, we can't let these girls fail. We can't let these kids. How dare you, Bishop? You should not be letting them fail. They fail enough. We do not need to be let. I mean, it was like, holy cow! I was committing the unpardonable sin. And but I kept rolling it out like I thought it was supposed to be rolled out, like the brethren meant for it to be, like the Lord wanted me to do it. And then finally, after 3 or 4 years, we finally hear this podcast with you and Brett, with you and Brad, and I'm like, vindicated.
Yeah, it was really good to hear that. I'm so glad that you felt that way, because I know a lot of people were really glad to hear that, and that, I think, is a good testimony to those feelings that a lot of us had. It's like, okay, I was doing the right thing, and to be reminded, even if it took years to realize that, okay, I was on the right path.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Absolutely. So how did you what went into getting the Ironside podcast started?
Well, that's a great question, and for me, I love talking with people. I love having conversations, like what you're doing here. And I thought, hey, what better way to get in touch with people than under the pretense of a podcast? And so I started that, did a few episodes, and it was fun. And then one of my guests, Tom Dinkelman, he actually asked if he could come on as co-host, and I thought absolutely. And so he has revolutionized that. I mean, he needs to take all credit for getting Brad Wilcox on, and all of our guests. We just had Hannah Stoddard on last night from she's the director of the Joseph Smith Foundation, and he does such a good job. So he's really helped out with that. But I love listening to podcasts like you guys. It's amazing. Like, I love that we can just hear people talk and have conversations. So are any of you familiar with the Jocko podcast, Jocko Willing?
Jocko Willing.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I'm a big fan of Jocko.
Oh, he's great. Yeah. So he was a real inspiration behind
Yeah.
starting the Ironside. And
Gotcha.
yeah, so it's growing. You know, I definitely want to keep going. And we had a lull for a bit with this move and me starting this new
Right.
job, and but we're back up and running. So and this is what we're doing now, is more lifeblood. So thank you guys for revitalizing me.
Good stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm about halfway through that interview with Hannah. That one's that was good, real good so far and stuff. And I like how she's talking about really doing what the Lord wants you to do, and figuring that out in your life. And it doesn't always make sense, right? But the Lord, if we trust Him, He'll take us in the directions that we need to go, for sure. So what about what about your love of writing and everything? I know you've got a couple books out there that I'm aware of. You may have some others, I'm not sure, but share a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. Writing is awesome. I've been writing stories since I was knee high to a short beaver. Like, I've always loved telling stories. Whenever my cousins and I come from a big family, my dad's one of 12 siblings, so just a mess of cousins, and I would always tell stories to the cousins. And I found little notebooks where I wrote stories when I was, in third or fourth or fifth grade or whatever. And I did a lot of poetry in high school and college. I did some short stories. And then just before I got married, I was talking with a buddy of mine, and he said, you need to write a full-length novel. And so I thought, okay, I'll try it. So I kind of came up with this idea, and he told me, he's like, you better write this or I'm going to steal your idea. So I said, I got to get it done. So I wrote a book, wanted it to be gospel focused. So it's about a returned missionary who fights crime. I just wrote the kind of story I would want to read, and sent it off to Deseret Book and their sister company, Covenant Communications. Didn't hear anything back. I thought, well, at least it was fun writing it. And then 6 months later, I get a message back from Covenant, and they're like, yeah, we want your book. I was like, oh, I better finish it and fine tune it. And so that's been really cool. I wrote a sequel. I'm almost done with the third book. Way behind on that, but I want it to be an ongoing series. I wrote a children's book for my daughter, a story that I made up for my daughter, and Riley Cruz, who's a phenomenal artist, she actually illustrated that. It's not widely available yet, but it is out, so people can hit me up personally if they want a copy. But yeah, I want to write. I believe everybody can write. I believe everybody can draw. And even if what you write doesn't turn out to be, a New York Times bestselling hit, even if it's not critically acclaimed, it is 100% yours. And nobody, even if they tried for 100 years, could perfectly replicate your expressions, your turn of phrase, your thoughts, and your feelings behind what you write. So whether it's a journal, whether it's narrative, I think everybody should be writing something.
Very good. I like that. So do you do a lot of journaling? I personally do a lot of journaling myself as well. So I guess you find yourself doing that as well.
100%. Yeah. I look back at my journals when I was in high school. I'm like, man, like it was really interesting to see what was so important to me back then. And it's like, man, why? And just the most random details about like what kind of shoes so-and-so was wearing. But it's really cool to see. And it's funny because I'll look at my journals from when I was a missionary, And the stories I remember from being a missionary that I tell all the time are not the ones that I journaled about. And the ones that I journaled about are ones that I didn't really remember until I've reread them.
Interesting. Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some big power in journaling. I'm currently the seminary teacher, and so I've taken the opportunity to share some of my entries from high school with the students, seminary students, just to kind of let them know, look, I've been in your shoes. I'm writing in the journal about different girls that I like, and basketball games and things like that. Just to try and make that connection with them. So journaling is I've talked about it several times on our podcast and stuff. Kenny can attest to it. It's a big thing for sure. I think it does a lot of good therapy wise as well, for sure.
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit. And so, yeah, I wish I was better at journaling, because I know from a mental health standpoint all the benefits of journaling. There's lots and lots of good benefits to your mental health, and just, yeah, it's great. So unfortunately, I'm one of those people that's just not very good at it.
Yeah, well, it's inspiration. It kind of works two ways. Like, I think, man, I want to have a day that's worth writing about, and it's like, ooh, I want to remember this from this day, so I better write it down. But I get so tired, sometimes, and I'll write in my journal and I'll fall asleep writing. So there's just a big line from the pen, and like, what was I saying there? So even if you can just get one sentence, like, today was a good day, it's like, oh, that's nice.
So I've speaking of kind of writing a book, and I like what you said about even if it's not a New York Times bestseller, it's still yours, right? And nobody can replicate that or duplicate that. And I started writing a book probably a couple of years ago now. Still, I'm actually in the proofreading and editing of it process, but it's basically based on leadership principles from a parenting perspective, and from the scriptures. What leadership principles can we pull from the scriptures and everything? So I may have to hit you up about the whole publishing process and things like that when I finally get to that point.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that there's a huge market for that. And really, the cool thing, there's never been a better time in the history of the world to write than this moment now, because the barrier of entry, it's so low, because a lot of traditional publishing houses are going the way of Blockbuster,
Right.
and it's so easy to self-publish, and there's not a stigma, because before, a lot of, oh, you're self-published, oh, you couldn't cut it with it.
Gotcha.
But now, like, the best books in the world are self-published or published by independent publishers. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's interesting to me, because I know as a musician, it's a similar situation now, because they're back in like the 70s and 80s and even 90s. There used to be, like, the big record companies would have their artist development and stuff. They would have scouts go out like to clubs and watch bands play, and that stuff is so completely gone now. It's completely, like, record companies don't recruit anyone unless you can prove that you don't need the record company. Like, most bands start out, you start your own record label and you publish your own music on your own record label. You promote your own tours, you do everything yourself. And then once bands get to a point where they're able to promote themselves successfully, then they start to get the attention of the record labels, and the record labels say, hey, we can offer you a little bit something extra here. And, then they try to sweeten the deal enough to where they can get a little cut of the pie. But yeah, it's interesting that you were saying that about writing, because that's kind of the way it seems like a lot of things are now, with the way the internet is. And, even podcasting, like what we're doing now, like, 30 years ago, we couldn't have done this. We couldn't have, you would have had to get on with a television station or a radio station or something. And you'd be lucky if you were able to get a 30-second spot with something. But, with the internet now, everything has changed. And so, yeah, it's a whole different ballgame now.
Great blessing with the technology. Technology has really, changed the world, and thinking about the ability that we have to connect. I was going to ask you about, you mentioned earlier about your love of people, just in general and everything. And I see that on Twitter. You've got a real positive attitude, constantly complimenting people, letting people know you, or letting us know you love us and everything. And what I was trying to figure out, how you take your love of fighting, right, causing physical, I mean, obviously you're not trying to injure anybody, but in the process, you're going to be putting some hurting on some people. How do you take that and mesh your love of people?
Man, that's a great question. I want to hear this.
Yeah, that is a tough question. And it's hard to answer without sounding like really arrogant. And I think I am pretty arrogant, so I'll just say it. But I don't hit people as hard as I can. I really don't. I really pull the punches, and that's not to say I've never lost, because I've fought better fighters than me. I've lost to better fighters than me. But yeah, you're right. I don't go out there with the intention to maim or hurt, and I'll tag some people, get some good shots in, and because I know they can take it, and I know that makes them better fighters and better men as well, to get hit and realize that they're not made of glass. And so I think for me, there's a really spiritual element to physical combat, because we do have bodies, and we can, use our bodies, and in these kind of it's a dichotomy between destructive and constructive, because we're building our muscle, we're building our endurance, and we're also, like you said, putting the hurt on people. So I like putting myself in situations where it's unusual to love people, because that's what Jesus Christ said. If you only do good to people who do good to you, like, what reward have you? If you only love people when it's easy, what reward? So if I can, take a cheap shot, or, fight someone who is trying to hurt me and still love them, then that's like an exercise in itself. So that's kind of where I come from. Yeah. I it sounds kind of hokey, but I've taught the youth at church lots of moves, lots of self-defense, and I think it's so much fun. For me, it's just fun. And my dad said, and he meant this as a compliment, but that I've just never had a killer instinct, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to the Olympics for boxing. I wanted to try out for the UFC. There were a couple opportunities I had, and it just wouldn't have made sense, because I don't have that element that where I could hurt someone if I needed to. If it was a really knockdown, drag out fight, like, because I've thrown a fight or two, just because, like, I don't want to hurt this guy, or I see I'm about to knock him out, and I'll back off. And it doesn't help my career any. And
Right.
I'm fortunate that I haven't had to make a career out of fighting, because I would be a horrible professional.
So you continue to use it as a hobby.
Captain Brett Moroni Cain here.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yes, well, I do not delight in the shedding of blood.
That's right.
No, I can relate to that, because I've been in, wrestling. I've wrestled my whole life, and wrestling, I never felt like I hurt anybody. And so, I'm pretty good at wrestling. We don't really, I mean, it's just moves and trying to pin someone. You don't really physically hurt them. But whenever I got into a physical fight, man, I stink, because if I'll get in a couple of shots, immediately I start to feel really bad inside. And I'm, oh man, I don't really, no matter how mad I started out, I'm like, oh, I didn't really mean that. I didn't want to hurt them. And then I'll just sit there and I'll just take it. They'll be whacking on me, and I'm not even throwing anymore. I'm like, well, this is so stupid. Why did I even start this? I can't even finish a fight.
Wow. I love that.
So I get
no joke.
Yeah. So I get what you're talking about.
Well, there's a large aspect of sportsmanship to that too. Like, I know my son, I've never been much of a fighter myself, but I got my oldest son into Taekwondo when he was really young, and he got a black belt in Taekwondo, and he's done a lot of judo and jiu-jitsu, and he wrestled in school. And So it was really interesting in supporting him and all the stuff that he did, seeing how much of it's not just a physical sport. There's a lot of mental to it too. You know, there's a lot of it's like a lot of it's like a chess game, you know, when you get into the martial arts, is things that I might not have even known otherwise. You know, that a lot of people aren't aware of how much actual thought and strategy goes into a fight. You know, what might just to some people look like a fight, you know, there's two guys beating the tar out of each other. There's a lot to it. And there's a lot of, I know I took him to lots of different tournaments, man. And there was a lot of mutual respect, you know, of course, like, just like anything else, there's some knuckleheads out there, but for the most part, there's a lot of mutual respect, man. I've seen so many fights where guys who just beat the tar out of each other and get done, and man, shake hands, hug, man, good fight. You know, it is really beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I feel like we're missing a lot of that now too. Because I remember, you know, I was in high school and I'd get in street fights, and after, you know, I'd shake hands, and you know, I'd see him at school the next day, and we're cool, like no hard feelings. But I feel like that there's been such a muzzle placed on physical confrontation, and competition among young people, that they have no recourse except to you know, go to the extreme, and we've seen that in the news, obviously, with these, you know, absolute horrible tragedies, or, you know, these like internet bullies, and just turning it into this kind of really hateful thing, when it's like, if you just let these kids scrap it out, then they would be fine. You know, you get a bloody nose and a scraped knee, but that's better than, you know, years of just hate mail or something.
Yeah.
But going back to you, Michael, wrestling is absolutely legit. My best friends here that got me this job, they're amazing wrestlers, and one of our coworkers is Mark Fuller, and he's a member of the church, and is a multiple time Olympian for wrestling too. So I take my hat off to wrestling. Wrestlers are no joke. So that's cool that you're a wrestler.
Aren't you a wrestler, Jackson?
So my background is I grew up doing, you know, your basic basketball, football, and baseball. Our schools did not have wrestling at the time, and I often wish that I would have, because, you know, you talk about street fights and things like that. I'm going to make a little confession here, okay, that I've never mentioned before on podcasts. So, there's been, I think all
true confessions,
especially boys, about every boy growing up is going to have an opportunity to go to blows with somebody. Okay. It's just, it's inevitable. Okay. And that happened to me a handful of times. And I always, if it was a one-on-one thing, I always found myself kind of backing down, maybe kind of cowering away a little bit. And I always hated that about myself. And I felt like if I could have had some wrestling or something, some kind of background in that, to have some confidence in physical confrontation, I think that would have done me personally good. So he was getting ready to go into 7th grade, and they held a wrestling camp. Our school started up wrestling a few years ago. And when I heard about the camp, I said, "You're going." He says, "No, I don't want to." He was also playing the football and the basketball. He's not, I don't have any interest in doing that. And I said, "You will go to this wrestling camp. You don't have a choice. You will go to it. You've got to at least try it." He went to camp, loved it. He's now a sophomore in high school, been wrestling ever since. And this weekend, we finished team duels. This weekend, we've got individuals this Saturday and stuff. And now my younger son, 11-year-old son, he's also into wrestling and stuff. So I have caught the bug. And again, about a year and a half, I started jujitsu. And got into jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome.
That's right. Ended up entering a tournament. I won one, and lost one. And but unfortunately, and I was going to ask you this, Brett, if you've ever had any serious injuries. I ended up having a pretty serious injury back about 8 or 9 months ago, and my right wrist had a scapholunate tear from a wrist lock. And now I'm not afraid to tap. I'll tap, but it just went too quick. Scapholunate ligament completely tore, and I waited for about a month and a half. And when I got to where I couldn't throw a baseball because of the pain, went and had it checked out. Anyway, had to have 2 pins put in there for 12 weeks. And now I'm in the middle of physical therapy and have lost about all strength and everything. It's Kenny and Michael know about it. It's horrible. I can't work out and all that stuff. I just got approved to get to start my machines and everything. But yeah, that's my background in wrestling. What are your thoughts on it building confidence? And
Hold
things
on there, Jackson. This is true. This is true confessions now, because you told everybody you hurt your wrist from exercising.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't tell me. You said I hurt my wrist from exercise. You never
I've told
told
everybody
me.
Jiu-jitsu.
No, you did not.
Well, jiu-jitsu is
It's exercise.
Whatever.
That's right.
Whatever.
Man, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry about that injury, dude. But I know you'll get it back.
Yeah.
100%, and you'll come back stronger. Yeah, wrist locks, dude. I'm not a fan of like the small joint manipulation like that. That's
Right.
one of my least favorite things. And that's the hard thing about tournaments too, because I think that, in training, and this, like I always like going against guys who are way better than me,
Mm-hmm.
because usually, they're worth their salt, and they're not gonna, absolutely thrash me. I'm gonna
Right.
learn a lot. I'm not gonna beat them, and they're gonna submit me, but they're not gonna hurt me. Or going against guys who are, way newer than I am, so I can teach them things. But white belts, especially, or newer people, I've never had that, but I've trained with guys like that are on my level, that are just 0 to 60, and there's nothing in between, and so things do go quick. Was that in a tournament that you?
No, this was at the dojo there. We were just training, and both of us were white belts and stuff.
Okay.
And
Yep.
and he wasn't being vicious or anything, and he actually used his weight. I was on bottom, and my hand got in between his chest, and so he just used that as an opportunity to put pressure down on my wrist, and
Mhm.
that's where it just went. And so
Yeah.
like I say,
and there's
he
no time.
he wasn't being vicious or anything, but
Yeah, just one
just
of those
kinda-
things.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey,
Injuries are no joke.
right. Have you ever had to go through any kind of major rehab or injury or anything like that in your
Yeah,
boxing
a
career or
couple
anything?
times.
Yeah.
Couple times. Fortunately, none from from fighting, amazingly. But I did get a couple injuries, a shoulder injury at work, and then the worst one I had was when I was coaching swimming. So I was walking along the pool deck, and I had my clipboard, and I was looking down at the swimmers, looking at my clipboard, and then I just like wasn't paying attention. I stepped off the deck into the pool, and my body went one
Wow.
way, my knee went the other way, and so just tore my meniscus, and so that was
Man.
the worst injury. And same thing, like you and I are super stoic, and I kept walking 7 miles to work every day,
Right.
and it was like a couple months later, like, man, I should probably get this looked at, man.
Wow.
But yeah, like we're talking about the advancements in technology. Like, look at the advancements in the medical field too. I mean, like we're
Yeah.
able to get put back together. I want to circle back real quick. Kenny, how old is your son that you got into Taekwondo?
Oh, he's like 25 now.
Oh, he's 25 now. Dude, you look so young. How do you have a 25-year-old?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's
that's
actually
awesome.
I really do. I really, really, really do think you're right. I agree with you 100% on a lot of how I feel like we're missing in our culture the ability for boys to be boys and learn how to be comfortable with physicality.
Right.
I think it makes people a lot healthier in a lot of ways. Like for my son, he's a police officer now, works for the city police department, and I think having that kind of confidence that I saw for him, instead of causing it to be him to be a violent person or fight more, he actually avoids. If you're comfortable with yourself like that, you can avoid almost any conflict, because people from my experience, the people who tend to lash out the most are the most insecure. When people are scared, that's when people do crazy things. And if you're very, very secure, then you're not scared and you're not in a position to try to act irrationally in any way. You feel comfortable enough to sit back, and if somebody's acting crazy, you can talk it out, because it's like with him, I saw, he would be in situations where people would be like, rah, rah, rah. And he's told me, even when he was in high school, he told me about stories where there was this one kid kept messing with him and like trying to like goad him into a fight or something. And he kept telling him, he said, look, I don't want to fight you. Just stop. And he said he finally just grabbed the kid's hand and just flipped it around and put him in a little wrist lock and was just like, listen. And, the kid obviously fell to his knees, was like, and screaming. He was like, listen, I've tried to tell you, I don't want to fight you. You need to calm down. And he was like, okay, it's over.
Right. That's the biggest thing for me that I wanted my sons is the confidence. Yeah. Being comfortable with confrontation. And there's nothing more confrontational than one-on-one combat, right? Of some form. And if you can be comfortable with yourself in those situations, I think that will bleed over into all areas of life. And I think physical combat sports, whether it's boxing, the taekwondo, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, all that leads to that in building of confidence.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to your point, Jackson, you talked about like not being happy with yourself for not getting into those fights. And to all our listeners, I mean, none of us are saying like, go out there and get in a fight right now. I mean, the best fights are the ones you never have. Like if you can like de-escalate, like you were saying, Kenny, like that's awesome. But knowing that you have the ability to protect those around you, that's the huge thing. So there's no, I know plenty of guys who've never been in a fight, and like more power to them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, like you say, having the ability and the confidence to de-escalate it. Right. Because I mean, because I've also, listening to Jocko podcasts and things like that. And they say the people that are experienced with fighting MMA, those are the ones that say, hey, look, if you can get out of a fight, get out of it. Okay. There's nothing wrong with taking the flight, right? Go ahead and get out of it. It ain't worth it, especially on the street where there's weapons, knives, all kind of stuff. But having the confidence and the ability to de-escalate the situation and be able to stand your ground and de-escalate, kind of like Kenny was explaining there. So,
yeah. And it's that confidence, I feel like, enables that, because
exactly
like you're talking about, if you're in a street situation, if your adrenaline is just pumping like crazy, then you're in a fight or flight and you're like, I need to do something, and you could end up doing something to initiate a situation that you could have avoided had you been able to be calm and relaxed and not being so worked up with the situation. So it's definitely good.
It's like being a missionary too, or even sharing the gospel. Because I mean, if you know the gospel and if you have a strong testimony of the gospel, you're not going to get shaken up, by someone who might be anti-Christian or even just anti-Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. We're not going to get into this need to prove something, but we can just bear pure testimony.
That's right.
That
I say that a lot.
Go ahead.
That's really quick, because that is something that I've noticed a lot of people not of our faith, other who identify as Christian, tend to often be very combative and very like they just want to prove you wrong kind of things. And we've living in the South here, there's literally churches that have had, Sunday school classes on how Mormons are satanic and whatever kind of nonsense, it's just it. And the thing is, I've never, ever in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had an experience at church where we have ever bashed anybody else's faith at all, period. And the reason, my theory or my personal belief about that is that I feel like when you have the truth, when you're confident about what you believe and what you believe is true, then you're not threatened by other people's beliefs. And I mean, I'm very comfortable with other people's beliefs. I'm not I don't feel threatened or intimidated by anyone else's faith, regardless of what they believe, whether Christian or not Christian, because I think when people lash out that way, it shows that, they don't have anything better to offer. It's like I feel like when I've got the truth, I've examined this faith inside and out, backwards and forwards, and it makes more sense to me than anything, in a logical sense, in a spiritual sense, in the emotional sense, in every possible way it could be tested. And so it does enable you to be more relaxed and comfortable with your faith and not feel like you have to, prove people wrong or have to show them up or whatever. Not have that verbal combat, when it comes to religious things.
Brett, that kind of leads us into our maybe this last little topic here before we wrap it up. So you've got a pretty strong presence on Twitter, and you see on Twitter there's a lot of whether you call it the ex-Mos, right, the ex-Mormons, or the prog-Mos, the progressive Mormons, and so there's a big push, especially you see it on social media, and then with you being out west, what are your thoughts on what's kind of going on and this kind of a wave, almost what do they call it, exit, some kind of Mormon exit or something like that? What are your thoughts on all that? And
yeah, that's a really good question, and I mean it's really hard to see. I've got close friends and my wife's family who are struggling, that are having these trials of faith, these faith crises, as they like to be called, and I really appreciated Elder Holland saying like that, like faith is always in crisis. I mean, like we have to nurture it. I mean, we're in a barren wasteland, and so we have to be constantly nurturing our faith, and it's sad to see. I actually had this conversation with my boss, who's also a member of the church, and I like to laugh at some of the antics of these former members, or transitioning members or whatever, because it's funny, but ultimately I don't feel worried. I don't feel that it's the end all be all for them. And for a long time I did, I would be very adamant and trying to push back on these little indiscretions that they were justifying. But now I'm kind of balancing that with I know that they will have the opportunity to come back to the Lord, that this is not the end for them, and not giving up, and not dismissing them, as hard as that is, because I really do love them. And so I think that this is a real test, and it's not necessarily a test for these individuals, but it's them testing the gospel. And once they see that the gospel is not going to go away, that the gospel is not going to change to meet the demands of the world, then they'll be like, wow, I guess that was the rock that I should have built on instead of this sandy foundation. And it's almost the opposite. I love this part when Jesus is talking about, it's in Luke, and he says, what man among you, who sets out to build a tower will not count the cost first, whether he has sufficient, lest he begin to build and cannot finish. And everyone mocks him and says, this man began to build but couldn't finish. And I think that's what all of these people are doing, is they're building a tower and they've not counted the cost, and they won't be able to finish, but they will turn around and be like, oh, there was a tower that was already built and finished and completed before, and I walked away from it. So I think that's going to be their experience, and to come back, and all we can do is love them. And it's fun. Like I see a lot of my friends and they'll make fun of some of the antics, and on the interwebs, we laugh and scratch and joke all the time.
Right.
But I really do feel for some of these people that are insecure, that are hurting. I mean, and that's the thing, like we are in an unassailable position. I don't need to get in a fight with these people and bash them and put them down, because they can't hurt me. I mean, it'd be like a little kid like coming up and kicking me in the shins. I'm not going to like roundhouse kick them in the
Right.
head. It's like, it's like,
Hopefully not,
wow,
anyway.
what are you doing? Like, no, get away from me, kid. So I'm not worried at all. I think so. Where I moved to, Yuba City, California, they're almost done with the Feather River Temple. I've never lived this close to a temple before, so I'm really, really looking forward to it. I know that the church is stronger than ever, and I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no.
Yeah,
I was just going to say.
How close are you is what he's going to ask you. How close are you to the Feather River?
That's right. Yeah, I was going to ask how close are you?
Oh, just like 2 blocks.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're all stoked here about the Jacksonville, Florida temple, because we're about an hour and a half north of Jacksonville, Florida. And so far where we live in Waycross, we are centrally located pretty much between 3 different temples. The Orlando, Florida temple, the Atlanta, Georgia temple, and the Columbia, South Carolina temple are all 4 to 5 hour drive. So, and we're in the Orlando temple district. Orlando's, it's about 4, you could get there a little under 4, but
yeah,
for us to have a temple within just less than 2 hour drive is just crazy for us. Yeah, it's a big deal here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited for you. And we're just going to see more and more of that. Elder Anderson gave a great talk in October about, drawing near to the Savior. And he talks about like the wheat and the tares growing up together. And even if we don't feel as strong as we'd like to, and even though we're not already all we want to be, we needed to have confidence that we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ. We are his Latter-day Saints. And if we're serious in our desire to be true disciples, then that's all that matters. So being serious about it and not taking it for granted, because it's hard. I think about that every day. I'm like, wow, I know so much and about the gospel, and I haven't even scratched the surface.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the most important
go ahead.
thing, I'll say one more thing, is that I can tell that you have the light of Jesus Christ. And that's when you talk about loving people. I believe that's what that is. And when, I encounter people on the internet who are hateful or mean or, just disparaging of my faith or whatever, it's just, it's hard. I mean, I have a tendency to get angry, and I do, but I have to check myself, because I have to understand that if you have Christ in your heart, you will love people. And my belief is that and even if I am angry, I don't hate these people, but because when you have Jesus Christ in your heart, he fills it. And when it's filled, there's no room to hate people. There's no room for the hate. It's completely full. And even if you're angry, you still love these people. So, and that's the hard thing. It's like, I feel like I try to love people too. I'm not always smiling though. I'm saying you're smiling. You're doing a better job of it. I'm sometimes gritting my teeth.
You got a great smile, Kenny. You got it. All you guys look
grumbling. I'm grumbling under my breath, just but I'm saying, okay, I love these people. I just need to just not be angry.
Yes, I need to remind myself of that all the time. I had a really interesting experience. So California, the stereotype of California drivers is 100% true in my experience, and people drive very aggressively here, and it's lots of honking, it's lots of gesturing, and it's easy to get drawn into that, just because that it's just part of California. But I saw someone who was stopped at a red light today across the intersection, and a car pulls up behind him and it's just like honking the horn. And this person isn't sure if they can turn right on this red light if they have time. So eventually they turn, and the guy behind him was just like honking. And this car that was being honked at drives, halfway down the block and then turns into the hospital. And the guy drove by all angry, gesturing, but it's like, man, I who knows what that person was going to the hospital for? Maybe I had a sick kid, maybe they had someone who's is passing away there. You never know. And it's like, I don't know if this person is having a bad day, and so if I can just like turn someone's day around, I would like to do that. So it's just like, it's not ruining. Like, I never want the last thing I do or say to be something that hurts someone's feelings. Again, which is it sounds kind of cheesy, but we have so much power. We have the ability to like change people's lives with a smile, and I'm not going to waste any time being a jerk.
That's right. That's awesome. Thank you for
Yeah.
not keeping your
Yeah,
candle under a bushel.
I don't think that sounds cheesy at all, Brett. No, at all.
No, yeah, that's great. Matter of fact, I'll to kind of close it out here, I'll read one of your tweets here in the last few days. It says Brett Cain, he says, "Guys, I cannot overstate my joy when I find out we have a friend in common or a distant connection or a similar interest or the same favorite thing, or when we share a private joke or a public win. You, me, we're going to make it." So that's the positivity and the great outlook and the love that Brett shares, and we appreciate it and feel it. So, you got any closing thoughts for us? And if you would, just kind of let everybody know how they can follow you and maybe get in contact with you or what have you if they want to. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute honor and pleasure. And I couldn't do it. Like, I could not be positive. Like, there's nothing special about me. Like, I am not here without any of you three and all your listeners and all of our friends. Like, that is why I'm positive. And it comes down to the church is true. That's why I'm so happy, is because the Book of Mormon is true. And I would love to get in touch with all of your listeners. You can find me on Twitter, Brett W. Cain. That's BRETTWCAIN, Brett W. Cain. Podcast, Ironside Podcast. It's on all platforms. My books are on Amazon or at Deseret Book. If you have the Deseret bookshelf, you can get the audiobooks as well, and they're on Audible. Would really appreciate that. And proceeds go to Operation Underground Railroad, all of my personal proceeds. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah. And I would love to connect with everybody. I'm an open book, and people can always reach out. So thank you guys. Thank you for what you're doing. Like, this is awesome. I love Saints in the South, and I know that you guys you're going to take over. The South will rise again.
That's right.
In the best way.
That's right.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Well, hey, man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for your time, and everybody out there, until next time, y'all keep on striving.
Amen.